And welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Adam from Miller's Custom Guitars. I'm so glad you could tune in. And you are listening to the N+1 podcast. This show is all about hobbies, passions, obsessions. And I like to bring guests on from all different hobbies and passions, obsessions. You know, we've had some really great shows in the past. We had on Joan of Hearts, who makes animated guitar pedal demos. I'm a musician. I play guitar, and she makes pedal demos, but she animates. She'll animate the guitar pedal, and the pedal demonstrates itself to you. Or I had on a guitar builder, Meredith Coloma, and she came on and talked about building guitars and how amazing that is, and how it's not all fun and games. Building guitars is hard work. We talk about a lot of different things, art, photography, everything under the sun. Well, not everything yet. We're going to get there eventually, but that's the show. But, what I'm interested in is not just finding out about these hobbies, passions, obsessions, but what is next? What is on the horizon? I want to find out what is driving our guests, what is their passion, and what's on the horizon. What is N+1? What's the next guitar that they're eyeballing? What's the next painting that they're dreaming about painting? What's next? And that's basically what this podcast is all about. And today I'm really excited about today's guest. One thing I've found is that this podcast is, half of it is me catching up with old friends, and half of it is me making new friends. And today is a new friend. Today, I'm very excited to introduce to Hadeel Khater. Hadeel, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Thank you so much for coming. And Hadeel, I was scrolling TikTok, a couple months ago, and I'm on, Book Talk, I'm on Dog Talk, and I'm on Wood Talk, and I'm scrolling, and I see a post from Four River Studio, and it was a post that you had made that was so interesting, and it was I'm pretty sure you probably make the TikToks, right?
Yeah.
So it was probably, I'm sure you remember this one, and it was like, here was my journey over the last year, or maybe it was 2 years, where you just you started, and it was your journey, like from your very first thing to where you are now, and it was so captivating, like the journey of your woodworking. And I was like, it just touched me, because I'm a musician, but I'm also an amateur woodworker. I'm an amateur luthier, making guitars and building my own guitars. And I was like, I reached out to you. I might have been the same day. I like looked you up on Instagram and reached out to you, and we've been playing Instagram tag for a couple months. But I wanted to have you on the show and talk about woodworking. And you're a nurse in the Chicago area, and you and your husband, Firas, are, you're working, you have a family, and you're making time to follow your passions, make projects. You're making some money off of it. But I wanted to talk to you and just see why, what's making you tick, and just talk about woodworking, because.
Good. Thanks. And I think the TikTok you're referring to is like about my carving journey and like how that kind of progressed, because the woodworking kind of came before. I started that maybe about 3 years ago, where I actually started really getting into woodworking, and the carving kind of came about a year later. When it was just trying to figure out a way around not having certain tools, and it kind of led me to wood carving, like power carving in specific. So yeah, I didn't think, it's funny because I was horrible about posting to TikTok. I've had a TikTok for years, and it just kind of sat. I would every once in a while, if I posted something to Instagram, I would just like post it also on TikTok, and then never open the app until the next month, like a month later, when I would decide, oh, let me post something else. And my sister would always tell me, like, you're such a millennial. She's like, the way you post on TikTok, you're such a millennial. You need to get with the times. But the funny thing is, like, I was at work, and all of a sudden I started getting like all these notifications, which I never got from TikTok before. And it was that video. I
Hit the
think people just,
algorithm. Yeah.
right. I don't know how it happened. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should be posting to TikTok because
Yeah.
I saw like a crazy growth just from like maybe one or two posts.
Well, let's get into, we're going to follow the format of my show, which I have
Oh,
these
sure.
scripted questions. But we have room for, rabbit trails and stuff like that. If there's something specific you want to talk about, that's feel free to talk about it. But I always start the show saying, like, what is basically what you do. And I always say, describe it like I'm five. You're making, you make a lot of carved woodworking projects. You use like a burr grinder. You make a lot of like salt cellars and stuff like that. But this like what you do. Can you describe what you do to our listeners, and then we'll follow up with how you got into it.
Sure. So I started woodworking about 3 years ago. About 3 years ago. I think it's just a matter for me of like problem solving, something that I've always
Mm,
done. I basically glue a bunch of pieces of wood together and try to make something nice out of it. Like, we use a lot of mostly hardwoods, some that are domestic to the US, some that are exotic. I just try to think of, like, I usually have these visions of the things that I'd like to make, and I figure out how to get from point A to point B. And
mm-hmm.
sometimes it's kind of a messy process, but I think for me, it's more than just like woodworking. Like, to me, I think it's more so just like figuring out how to turn a vision into something tangible.
Mm.
So yeah, and I do a lot of power carving. That's kind of what
Power
I
carving,
enjoy the
right?
most. Where you could use different burrs or accessories to kind of carve out wood, not in a because there's also chisels and things that you could use manually. I'm also very impatient, so I like to get through pieces kind of quickly, but it's been interesting. It's been a fun journey, and like power carving in specific has really opened up a lot of opportunities for like to be creative, and not make like the traditional things that people start with, like just
Right.
cutting boards and things like that. So we make a lot of things. We make whatever we think is like something, our goal is to make unique and timeless objects, pieces that could live in somebody's home and just elevate the space in some way. So a lot of it is inspired by my husband's a historian. He
Mm.
specializes in like Ottoman history. So a lot of his inspiration comes from that. Like there's pieces with Persian calligraphy and all that. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just making things. That's
So,
probably the simplest way to say it.
that's amazing, and so that's a great description of some of the things that you're working on. You mentioned the power carving, and like so I mentioned, I'm working, and
Mhm.
so like like the stuff I'm working on is either like lots of like straight cuts or like bandsaw cuts or like guitar, right? So it's like I'm
Right.
using templates, with my router, or like the back of the neck, I'm using a rasp or something to round it off, whatever. I'm not power carving, right? I guess you could make something like that, power carve. So what you're doing is very different than the kind of stuff I'm doing. Like a lot of the things that you're talking about are very familiar, and they resonate with me. Like being drawn to the projects and being drawn to the woods, and the gluing things together, and all that stuff. I just love having a project that just like consumes you. Like for me,
Hmm.
when I get the bug, like I like dream about it, and like when I'm at work, I just chomping at the bit, like, like I'm helping a customer, and I'm like, okay, can't wait till I can clock off from work and get home and go to work, like I'll
Same.
walk through the door, or like when I have when I've got my teeth into a project, like I'll walk home, give the wife a hug, pat the kids on the head, and go right out to the garage or something. And it's just,
Right.
like it just consumes me, and I love it. That's amazing. I did have a question for you, Hadeel.
Hmm. Yes.
A lot of girls, okay, if they're looking for a project, they might grab some scissors and some some paper and pick up scrapbooking, or they might pick up some knitting needles.
Not the
So,
girls I know.
so I don't mean to stereotype, okay? Because
Right, no.
obviously, because nowadays, okay, I mean, YouTube's full of everybody doing everything, okay?
Right.
So, how did you end up in the shop? How did you end up with wood in your hands? What drew you to woodworking?
So, like I said, I've always been like kind of a problem solver. And a problem that we had when we first got married about a decade ago was that we wanted a lot of or I wanted a lot of nice things. And I quickly realized that we weren't going to be able to afford the things that I wanted on the budget that we had. And so I would, you know, instead of doing wallpaper on a wall, I would stencil a pattern onto it, or I would flip, go to the thrift store and do like pick up a chair and reupholster it. And just basically like furniture flipping was really kind of how everything started for me.
Okay, that was kind of your
But
gateway into,
yeah,
you would start with furniture.
right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had so many hobbies and interests. I actually have been a scrapbooker in the past.
Mm,
I have remnants of so many past hobbies, and it's funny because like the reason I got into woodworking was actually my husband, even though I mostly do it now because he's been busy with his like school stuff during the pandemic. So I'm a nurse, I work in the ICU, and it was, as you could imagine, it was just very stressful. And it was, my husband was, of course, home because everybody else was home.
of course, I remember.
Yeah, right. Everybody was home except for, essential workers or whatever.
Right,
But I would go to work and just, see some really crazy, sad things.
right,
And it was very consuming. And I remember one day, Firas, my husband, he made a cutting board out of material which we now know should not be used in cutting boards. Like red oak shouldn't be used in cutting boards because it's
right,
so porous.
right,
But he made a cutting board out of red oak and maple, just glued them together. We had very basic tools at the time, and was super excited about it. I was like, "Look at this! What I made!" And it just slowly turned into his friends asking for cutting boards. And then we're like, let's just open an Etsy shop. And it snowballed a little bit, but then it turned into me being in the garage with him, being like helping, with design, or how about we do it this way? How about we do it that way? And
mm,
then quickly just taking over, like, I want to do it myself.
mm,
And then I got bored of the cutting boards are really nice, and we still make them every once in a while just because they consistently sell. But I just got like, I just kind of, that morphed into me wanting to do other things and other projects. So that's kind of, and then we went to a lumber yard and we're so amazed by all the different kinds of
mm.
woods. Like, we're like, can you believe there's something that's like naturally purple or
Oh
naturally
my
yellow and
God.
stuff? So from there, we would just experiment, and we're like, for us to be able to actually pursue this hobby, like we need to generate some kind of a income, a revenue from it, because it's an expensive hobby.
Yeah,
So everything that we were making in the beginning, we put right back into the business and like
sure.
upgraded our tools. So that's kind of how I do it.
Don't you love like the lumber stores, man? I just
Yeah.
like, for me it's like I don't want Disneyland. Like, just give me like $700 to spend, that I can spend without any like regret or remorse at a lumber store.
Right.
Like, it's like Candyland, man. I just go in there, all the woods, and oh my gosh, and the tools and the
Right.
accessories, and like, oh my gosh, we have there. I live in Central California, and the close, actually, the kind of the high Sierras, and the closest one's like an hour away, but it's a good one, man. Oof, man, it's a good one. The first question I have for you, the first kind of getting into my questions is, for woodworking, what are some misconceptions that you've come across in your journey?
I think the biggest one to me has to be the fact that, everybody kind of, when I first started really getting into it, and honestly, I wanted to start getting into woodworking probably a decade prior.
Oh, really?
But
Wow.
everything that I was seeing on YouTube, like, there's so much information out there, but a lot of it is with the assumption that you have some level of knowledge of woodworking and tools and how they work and what they're called and stuff. So to me, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that so many people want to start at like ground zero, you know, like you like you kind of said in the beginning, like, talk to me like I'm five, explain to me like I'm five. It's kind of like that. Like, I wish somebody had told me, like, from the
Mm-hmm.
this is a table saw. These are the points of pressure that you're putting on your piece as you're
Yep.
pushing it through the saw,
Yeah, definitely.
over the blade and all that. So I think for me, a misconception, and I feel like it's just because people are just talking to others who they think are just have the same knowledge that they do. But also, I think it's the fact that it's such an accessible thing. Like, you don't have to have all the latest tools and
Right.
the fanciest tools and to
Exactly.
get started. You could get started with the most basic things, which is kind of where we started. We
Right.
started with very inexpensive tools, and yeah, of course, you're going to get different results,
Mm-hmm.
but you could do some really cool things with with entry level tools, and it doesn't have to cost a ton right off the bat. So, and I wish more people knew that, and I wish more people were like understood how easy it is to start to just get into it.
You have a great point because, like, for example, nowadays, and we talked about this on our show before. Nowadays, one of the ways that people are learning things is one of the big ways is YouTube, right?
Hmm.
When I was growing up, I actually had shop class in junior high. Okay,
Right,
I don't know if you're as old as I am. Okay, I'm 42. I had shop class in junior high. Okay, and they actually you made things out of wood. I don't remember anything about it, but um, but nowadays, if you want to learn how to make something out of wood, well, you go to YouTube. But you go to
right,
these YouTube channels, and they'll have, like, I don't know, 75 or 100 grand worth of tools, right?
right,
And then, Powermatic saws and saw stops, and like, $7,000 band saws, and like, you don't need any of that to get started.
right,
Like you were just saying, most of the time, some of the best advice we can give people is like, okay, buy just the tools that you need for the job that you're doing, right?
right,
And for that, just buy half the tools that you need. Like you can get by with a hammer, you can get by with a pole saw most of the time. Like you probably need a table saw. Like, that's probably the most important tool in any shop, is like a table saw. But like, my table saw I bought for, I don't know, $120 from off of Facebook Marketplace,
right,
or Craigslist or something like that, for locally, and it's fine. Like, I bought my bandsaw used for, I don't know, $75 or something like that, and it's fine. They're working, and yeah, you can spend a lot of money, but you can also, if you're a smart shopper, you can find the tools that you need, and only buy what you need when you need it. You
right,
don't have to go drop 5 grand, 10 grand, and get all the tool. Oh, I'm going to start woodworking. I better go drop 10 grand and
right,
fill my shop full of tools I'm never going to use. No, go down to Harbor Freight and buy the cheapest thing that you need when you need it. And if that breaks, then go buy a good one. If you're using it so much that it breaks, go buy
right.
a good one.
That's kind of what we did. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we actually started with, our palm router was a Ryobi palm router, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. That's what I started with too.
yeah, and even though, like, now we've upgraded since to a Makita, and now I could tell like a huge difference
Right.
in how it cuts. But with that Ryobi palm router, I was able to make some really cool things, and
Right.
yeah, and
The tool
and
still works.
right,
And
still works
right.
exactly.
And I feel like you'll get more bang for your buck with spending the money on better sandpaper. Like,
Oh
if
yeah,
you buy good sandpaper, if you're buying the garbage, that they sell at the dollar store, you're not going to have good success. Go buy good
right,
sandpaper. If you
right,
use that on your if you use that on your Ryobi, you're going to have good success. You use proper sanding techniques, you're going to have good
Right.
success. Your project's going to turn out great. You know, if you're using the junk they sell at the dollar store, you're going to turn out, you're going to have a bad time. That's awesome. Good. That's a good answer, Hadeel.
Thanks.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you've come across, or have you had any bad experiences during your time as a woodworker?
I don't feel like people have ever been like outwardly negative or anything like that, at least not to my face. But I think for me, I do see how if you're looking at Instagram and interacting from people and just looking from the outside in, I see how it could feel a little bit isolating. Like I feel like there's a lot of these like crews and their like cliques and whatnot that and I've heard from some people that they're like they feel like they don't belong anywhere. And to me, I just feel like I don't feel like I belong anywhere either, but I don't mind. Like I'm creating my own path, my own, and like I get along with everybody really well. I feel like it's been a very positive experience overall, but I think a big challenge for me is sometimes I'm like second guessing whether I'm actually doing good work or if people are just impressed because I don't look like the typical woodworker and I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's just like they have lower standards for me just because I'm kind of breaking some, stereotypes that are common in woodworking in this woodworking space. So that's been a big challenge of mine. It's not anything that anybody's done or any it's like more like an internal struggle. It's like, am I actually good? Because people tell me I'm okay, I'm good at this. I'm like, but is it me? Is it my skill? Is it my merit? Or is it just that people are impressed that somebody who looks like me is doing this? So I think to me, that's like my biggest challenge. And it hasn't really been from anybody, but I also have been like, I went to a woodworking conference earlier this year. It's like geared towards content creators and all that. And that was kind of something that I did notice is that there would be some experiences where I felt like people were just talking to me just to kind of, like be seen talking to me to show like, oh, like, look, I'm inclusive and this and that. Or, brands that would just completely, like, I would be standing there waiting to talk to somebody and nobody, like, they wouldn't, nobody would approach me, or I would approach somebody, they'd ignore me. That happened a couple times, but other than that, it's just mostly been a very positive experience. And, like, people have been very inviting and welcoming and encouraging and positive overall. So, yeah.
Well, let me just speak to that a little bit because I saw that TikTok. I've been following you since then, and I've been very impressed with your work. I just think that it's fantastic. I think that the pieces that you're obviously you don't post the fails, which we as all woodworkers we all have the failures, the scrap bin, the junk pile, but the stuff that you've been posting, it's beautiful, it's tasteful. I'd love to have one, if I could afford it, but I think it's amazing. But on the flip side, hey, one of the things that I'm concerned about when I started this podcast is I'm a straight white Christian dude, right? I didn't want to have a podcast where all I did was talk to straight white Christian dudes, right?
Right.
So, and I saw you and I saw your passion for your work and I saw the quality of your work. And, I saw that you were, a person that was different from me. And I said, I want to talk to this person. I love your work and I wanted to talk to you. So, it's a little bit of both, but I really wanted to talk to you.
I appreciate that, but like, I feel like I feel like is a good thing too, because it's nice if there's somebody out there watching that might look like me and be like, oh, hey, if she's doing it, I want to do it too. Like if it could encourage somebody else. And it's nice I feel like a lot of people are trying to break this stereotype of like woodworkers look a certain way. And I
Right.
really do appreciate that. I think it's important. I think it's really great to show that, because I wish when I was wanting to start a decade ago, I would have seen somebody that looked like me. doing this. Like, I feel like maybe it
Definitely.
could have changed how quickly I got into it or something. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not really anything anybody's said or done. It's just for me, like, I think it's more so just like imposter syndrome. Like, I'm sure
Right.
everybody experiences it to
Totally.
some degree.
Yeah.
So that's like my personal thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing that we definitely have in common is I fight that imposter syndrome all the time. So we are the same. So there we go. So there we go. So look, the question I ask every one of our guests is, you're doing this hobby, you're making these projects. What about it fills your bucket? Why do you do it?
I just enjoy the process of, failing, because I actually do share my failures quite often. And I feel like those are the things that resonate with people more
Mm,
than just the successes and like, oh, look at this
sure.
beautiful product that I produced or whatever. So to me, it's the thing that fills me more than anything is just overcoming hurdles within a process of like trying to get from point A to point B. That's the thing that kind of, because to me, I look at these things as like a small set of challenges, like a series of challenges when I'm making something that I have in mind, and I'm constantly like failing at every step.
Hmm.
And every time I overcome that failure, it feels great. It feels like I've overcome small challenges throughout the entire process. So to me, that's really the thing that I've come to appreciate about this the most. It's
Hmm.
kind of really filled me, because in a way, it's like, okay, if I could overcome these challenges in something like woodworking, like there's definitely challenges outside of woodworking that I could approach in the same way. Like, these are just a small series of
Right.
challenges,
Yeah.
tackle them one thing at a time. So
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed learning a little bit more about myself and kind of how I approach things. Yeah, and I mean, it's nice to crank out beautiful projects, but also I don't have the time that others do, that people who are full-time woodworkers do. I just don't. It's been so rewarding to try to, like, create things on my limited time. But I think another thing that's really great to me is how many people have really resonated with some of the things that I've put out there. And it's never really like, oh, this project that I completed. It's like the things that I share throughout the project. Like I said, I share my failures often, and people have messaged me saying, "Hey, like, your approach to how you looked at this piece and stuff was really like it's something that I needed to hear." So that's the fact that somebody could resonate with anything that I'm putting out there is really rewarding. And, I've actually had younger kids who had their moms tell me, like, hey, we watched your videos on repeat, and like, we're super excited about it, and we're
Aw.
about to get into power carving and all that.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
the fact that it's like little kids to, women my age to like women a couple decades older than I am. So it's been really fun to kind of learn how hear from others how they're responding to all this.
Oh, that's amazing. Um, I have some more questions, but I actually wanted to jump in with kind of some things that I've been jotting down. Um, so you mentioned problem solving, which is something I love about woodworking. Also, is like specifically for me, it's like making jigs. Like you're trying to do
Yeah,
something, you have to make a jig. Like I need to do this thing, and I need to do it either safer or more repeatable or
right.
whatever. What are some of the things that you said problem solving? What are some of the problem solving that you've done that you really liked or that you was really challenging for you?
Really, exactly that, jigs, because
Yeah, jigs. I love
I've
them.
noticed there's so many times where I've just like, I really want to avoid making a jig, because I'm like, that's time spent making
Mhm.
something that's not even like gonna give me like a final
Right.
project, like they're not even gonna end up with an actual project from it. So
Yeah, like a
like
one-time
I'm
use
working,
jig, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to make a one-time use jig, right?
right,
It's like something you're going to use over and over again, like making guitars, right? Something I'm going to use over and over again it makes sense, but like a one-time use, I don't want to do a one-time use jig, right?
right.
Those are the ones that kill
But
you. But
the funny thing is, I was trying to avoid making a segmented ring jig, which I could see myself using quite often.
right,
But I saw this tool, like this miter set, that, was supposed to give me some kind of shortcut, and it worked for a little bit. But then, as soon as I started like messing with the different sizes, the different angles of the segments and stuff, it just turned into a big nightmare. And I was wasting so much material with like segmented rings that had giant gaps and whatnot. And literally, after months and probably a lot of money and failed segmented rings, I ended up making a jig. Just like one of my friends is a wood turner, and he's like, "Look, I'm just telling you, you're gonna need to make a jig." And I, like, for months was like, "It's fine, Tony. I know what I'm doing. Like, I'll figure something out. I'm not making a jig." And then I made a jig, and he's like, "I told you so," because now it's like no matter what
right.
size
It's
segment,
perfect every
it looks
time.
perfect
How long
every
did
time.
it take you to make the jig, Adil?
It literally took beginning to end maybe 2.5 hours, and that was like
Right,
interrupted. And I'm like,
right.
I can't believe
Yeah,
how
you put it
long I
off for like
spent.
6 months.
Right, right.
That's awesome.
Literally months.
And one of the things I just as a woodworker, I just see all these gorgeous woods that you work with, and I'm just like a sucker for like any natural, beautiful, exotic wood. What do you have a favorite? I'm not asking you to pick a favorite kid. I don't know if you have more than
Right.
one, but do you have a favorite wood that you either to work with or the final product or that
Gonna
you
be a boring answer.
hit me?
Walnut.
Walnut. It's so beautiful,
I love working with walnut because it's
so good.
very like it's very predictable in terms of, when you're carving it, you know what it's gonna do. When you're oiling it up, finishing it, and it doesn't, like, it's the perfect tone of brown. It's not too warm, not
It's
too
beautiful,
cool.
so beautiful.
The
Mine's
green, you could have like a walnut burl, or you could have just like a beautiful subtle green. Like, yeah, walnut is just
Mine's boring too. Like I love the exotic hardwoods, but give me like African mahogany. It's
right,
just so gorgeous. Like when with the chatoyance in there, like
right,
not even like with flaming or anything, just like the natural chatoyance of the wood when you get it
right,
oiled, and it just oh my
right.
gosh, it's so. I made a headboard out of that with roasted poplar edges, a frame on it, and it's
Uh-huh.
just dynamite. I love
Yeah,
it.
I do love sapele, which is, I guess, similar
Right,
to,
similar, right.
it's very similar to mahogany, but you're right. It always has this like almost always has a beautiful chatoyancy to it. Like, it's, yeah,
For
without fail.
for the woodworkers, if you're listening to this, chatoyance is when you look at wood and it has like a shimmer to it, like it almost looks like it has like a depth to it, and the grain almost looks like it's wet even though it's not, and it has like a shimmer to it. That's the chatoyance in the wood, and woodworkers love that.
Yes, yes. I
um,
rarely like it. I consistently get it with sapele. I don't feel like I get it often with any other wood.
Yeah, check out African mahogany, not like regular mahogany or true mahogany, but check out the African. I love it. It's my favorite. Do you have what? What are you using? Do you have a favorite wood finish that you like?
I really do like a good hard wax oil,
Yeah.
specifically tried and true. The
Okay.
tried
Try
and
it.
true
I'm
original.
gonna write that down.
Yeah, it's my favorite hard wax oil. I know a lot of people like Rubio, but
That's what
it's
I've been
just,
using is Rubio.
Rubio is great. Like, I
It's
like the finish that you
expensive,
get.
man.
It's
It's expensive.
such a process. Like,
Right.
you can't sand it too much. Like, you got to sand to maybe 120, or you got to like, uh, so it's just
It's
too
good
complicated.
though. It is good.
It's good.
Have you tried it? Have you used it?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Yeah.
I've used it for a dining table that we built for a friend. We have some coffee tables that we've made, and we finished it with Rubio. But yeah, tried and true is fantastic.
Mhm.
I've used other hard wax oils. I will not say the brand name, the company name, but um, I
No one
thought it.
watches this podcast. You can say it, man. We got like 40 listeners a week, man. You can say
So,
it.
have you used Odie's oil?
No.
Odie's oil is, I feel like, really expensive. They're very cryptic about the ingredients. Um, but they're always like, we're the only brand that's like 100% food safe. And they'll like, and then, but I've used it with my carved pieces. And after, like, if I let them sit for a couple weeks, they start to develop this like white film
I've
almost.
heard that. I've heard that
Right.
sometimes. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, I would skip Odie's. I like trying and experimenting with different hard wax oils and different finishes, and I like Armor Seal from General Finishes is a good one,
Hmm.
but that's not a hard wax oil. I think it's like
Right.
a almost like a polyurethane, not or something like that. But yeah, it's another good one. But I haven't used it for a while because the tried and true is always like my go-to.
Yeah, I love for the for guitars. I've been experimenting with spraying lacquer, right? Because us
Also
guitar
good.
players, right?
Right.
We want the old vintage lacquer, right? Because we're stupid.
Right.
You got to mask up, and it's just a nightmare, right? You have to dilute it. It's horrible.
I
Let
actually
it.
do like lacquer for some pieces too. It just
Yeah,
really depends on what it is because lacquer
yeah.
gives you a different feel, a different look
Hmm.
completely. And sometimes I do like that a lot.
Yeah, us guitar players, like we're so dumb. We're convinced because that's what they used in the 50s, right? We're convinced that it makes the guitar sound different than poly. we're stupid like that. But and it's fast, right? You spray,
Right.
it's like 30. What is it? A couple minutes between
Right.
coats, and then you can. But it's got an off gas, and it's toxic, and it's horrible. But so I've been experimenting with that, and then I did one guitar with Rubio. So we'll see how that turns out. I haven't, I've never heard of, no one talked about people doing guitars in Rubio. So that's like
Right.
my experiment guitar. So we'll see how that. I'm like, they use it for hardwood floors. It's pretty durable. We'll see how that works. So, anyway, do you have something that you might consider the Hadeel signature move, like something that, like people that see your work often, or maybe your husband walks by and like, oh yeah, that's a Hadeel.
I'm trying to think because I was just thinking about this the other day. So I have, when I'm in a creative rut, I pull
Mm,
out just a scrap piece of wood and I start carving. And for some reason, the pattern that I always end up defaulting to, if I'm not trying to push myself to do something different, I always default to almost like this like wavy pattern that I don't even know how to describe it, but it kind of looks like a little bit like ropes going out in all different directions, and it's kind of
mm,
very flowy and wavy and stuff. And I notice that every time I'm taking that break to kind of clear my mind a little bit, and I'm not really overthinking things and I'm just kind of going for it without much thought, I somehow default to that. And it's like I'll do it a lot with, like, I make these small propagation stations, which is basically like a scrap piece of wood that holds test tubes and whatnot. And the reason I started making those was because I wanted to kind of test out different techniques and patterns and stuff before I translated all of that to like bigger pieces and furniture pieces. And they've been very popular. Every time somebody sees a post about it, they'll ask about it. But yeah, that's my default signature thing. And I didn't even realize that I do it. Like sometimes
that's funny.
like I kind of blank out, like I kind of space out and just start carving, and that's usually what I end up with. And I'm like, okay, this is probably like I don't know why I default to this, but it's very me. Like I've not seen this like pattern
Yeah.
or anything,
I
you
think
know.
that might be, when I saw that first TikTok, I think that might be what jumped out at me because I don't think I'd seen anything like that. Those wavy patterns. It was definitely original. That's for sure. Definitely, I've never not seen anything like that. So it's definitely a signature style. That's for sure. Do you have something that you might consider a guilty pleasure? That, like, if I was to see you doing it as a woodworker, I might be like, Hadeel, what's going on? Come on.
Guilty pleasure. I can't think of any. Well, I mean, I guess I feel like a lot of people have this in common. Sometimes when I'm like gluing up some pieces, I'll be really messy with the glue on purpose because I like for it to dry up. And then I just sit there in the garage like for like 30 minutes just peeling the glue off my fingers.
Like we're in kindergarten again, where you have the finger guard,
Right.
the glue glove.
Exactly. Right. So I don't know
Nice,
if that's really guilty pleasure because
nice.
I feel like it's a fun thing to do. I feel
Yeah.
like more people probably do it, but
Well,
yeah.
I'm going to call you out because every woodworker has the same guilty pleasure, I think, which is, I mean, how are you at keeping scraps?
Oh, horrible. So here's the
I
thing.
can use that. That's usable. That's a good scrap right there. I can use that.
Okay, no, I've gotten a lot better though, but the problem is, so we have like a burn pile, but I don't know where currently, I don't know where the real bill is for it currently. So now, and everything is just a mess right now. I'm
Right.
redoing the whole
You're
garage,
you're doing the
redoing the,
garage, right?
right. So, but yeah, I realized like when I was redoing the garage, like there's some pieces in there from like when we first started, and I'm just like, I can't believe I thought I would use this. And it's like a
Right.
little triangle.
I know, right? I'm really bad. I'm really good at throwing away scraps that are cutoffs of like 2x4s or two by
Right,
sixes or
right.
like half by 10 boards that are part of the construction lumber, any construction lumber.
Like OSB.
I'll chuck that stuff all day. But the
Same.
exotic lumber is like I paid so much money for that, and it's so nice. It's like I'm keeping it, man.
That's exactly how the propagation stations started because I would have these like scrap pieces of four or 8-quarter wood, and I'm like, this is 8-quarter. I'm not tossing this. And so it just started like, oh, let me put a Forstner bit and like drill a hole in it, and put a test tube in it, call it a propagation station, and call it a day.
So what is that? What do you mean propagation station? What is that?
Oh, like I said, so it's like scraps of wood that carry test tubes, and I'm really into plants too. Like I love
Mm,
house plants, and so to propagate a plant, you take a cutting,
mm.
put it in water, it grows roots, and you can make more plants out of that
Okay,
cutting.
I get it.
Yeah. So and like this, in the pandemic time, everybody
Sure.
was in plants and house plants. It was just like a huge thing. So yeah, instead of
That's a good way to
tossing
use scraps. Yeah.
right, I would make propagation stations, and they sell out every time I post that I made some more. So yeah, I mean it's a good way to use scraps, but it's just like there's no way I'm possibly getting to all of the scraps that I have to make turn into propagation stations. Like I have other things that I need to get to. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You could take like a Saturday and take like 4 hours and churn out like 50 of them, and it probably wouldn't even dent your scrap stash, right?
exactly, exactly. And I'm just like, okay, let's get real.
Us woodworkers and our scraps, right? Anyway,
Right.
do you have something that when you look back at your time, you said you've been woodworking, doing this for as a kind of a hobby side hustle for 3 years or so, that you look back and you think of maybe one thing as your favorite or best moment, maybe like a shining moment where you look back and you're like, man, that was so special, or that was so cool. Maybe one thing you built that was like really special, or maybe one moment or a customer, or I don't know. I'll leave it to you.
Um, there's been a couple moments. There's been a lot of like pinch me moments, which I'm
Yeah,
really
tell me
grateful
about
for.
it.
But one of them was the console table that I built. It took over a year, but I was really proud of it when it was done because I overcame a lot of things that I was telling myself like I couldn't do this. There's no way. It was my first time experimenting with proper joinery. Like it had mortise and tenon joinery.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, I can't, there's no way I'm not good at this. But, I figured out a way to use a drill press to hollow out most of the material and cleaned it with a chisel, which, worked out just fine. Um, another, another one is, so I was featured on, the Fine Woodworking magazine website for
Cool.
something, yeah. Like I wrote a blog post for them.
That's
They
awesome.
Right. They messaged me and they were like, "Hey, we really liked this one particular project that I had done at the time. And they're like, would you do a quick blog post on it? And we'll put it on our website. So that was crazy because I'm
That's
like,
bonkers.
right, because this was even before I actually started getting into woodworking. I knew what Fine Woodworking magazine was. I knew what I used to see those magazines all the time. So it was such a
Wow.
right. It was such a pinch me moment
That's
that
so cool.
they know I exist.
Wow. That is amazing, Hadeel. That's so cool. Are you telling me that I have Hadeel from Fine Woodworking Magazine on my very own podcast? I
Yeah.
didn't even know you were so famous. That is so amazing. That's so cool. I'm joking a little bit, but that's so amazing. That is so cool. Hey, Adam from the future here. I'm sitting here on the 4th of July editing this podcast and got to this part of the podcast. And, I was so intrigued by Hadeel's comment about her article on the Fine Woodworking website. I had to go look it up. And it's awesome. So I am going to also include a link to that in the show notes. It's a beautiful blog post that she wrote about making prayer beads using scraps. We talked about scraps in this episode. And I recommend you go check it out. It's a beautiful blog post. Anyway, I will put a link to the show notes to that Fine Woodworking article, and I hope you will check that out. It'll be in the show notes, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on a audio podcast player. Okay, back to the show. Okay, so if we have a listener here that's like this is really cool. Woodworking sounds awesome, because it is awesome, guys. Woodworking is awesome. What advice would you give to that person that is maybe considering going out into the garage, out into the shop, or out into the backyard for the first time? What advice would you give to that person?
I would say start small. Start with, take one step at a time. Figure out the order of operations, because I think that'll be a big thing. Like, what do I need to do first in order to get to the next step? I know it sounds really silly, but it took me a while to understand how important it is to do things in the proper order. And I would say if you could afford it, take a class, take a 101 class that will teach you the basics of how to use, your basic hand tools like a chisel, how to do hand cut joinery, because it helps you. You might not use hand cut joinery in the future, but it helps you really understand how these things work and why they work and why they're necessary and important. So I would say if you could afford the education, take it. And you'd be surprised at how many scholarships there are for beginners to just get into the craft. So if it's something that you're really pursuing as a hobby and you're actually interested and serious about it, try to see what opportunities are out there that don't cost an arm and a leg. But also, don't be afraid to ask questions. This community is so responsive and positive, and they see somebody that's new and they just try to bring them under their wing. So I would say don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Reach out to people.
Yep, for sure. Everyone that is making stuff at one point had never made anything. So
exactly.
Yeah, just find a place to start. And I would also recommend, if it makes sense, like obviously if you're making a table, I would say probably don't start with a table.
Right.
If it makes sense, maybe start with something that you can make with hand tools, something that you're not going to chop your arm off if you make a mistake, right? Maybe grab a saw, grab some chisels, grab a hammer, and it's it'll be a lot of work. But then when you get a saw, it'll be like, whoa, this is fast,
right?
And you'll know how to take measurements, how to do,
right.
Make some joinery and
We that's what we made I took a 101 class, and we made 2 picture frames because they helped us practice different hand cut joinery. One of them we did mortise and tenon joinery, on one end, and then the other end had through tenons. And then we did like half lap joints and bridle joints. And then we did dovetails. So, I mean, you don't need all the things. And starting out, you can do so much with a good set of chisels and a pull saw. That's all you.
Or even just like an affordable set of chisels. You don't need to go spend like $300 on a set of Narex chisels. You know, you can just get the Harbor Freight chisels. They're fine. Learn how to sharpen them. That's huge. Like if you have an affordable set of chisels and you know how to sharpen them, they can do the job. You know?
Exactly.
It took me a long time to learn how to sharpen chisels.
I didn't even realize you had to sharpen them until like maybe a year in, like that you had to sharpen them right out the box.
Yep.
And I was like,
and you have to sharpen them almost every time you use them. But if you do that, then it doesn't take long. You know, like 30 seconds or so, and you're sorted out, you know? So, oh man, it took me so long to finally figure out the chisel sharpening thing. So, okay. So I have a segment on my show, and I don't know if we can do this today, but we have a segment on my show called Let's Get Into It, where we actually, with the guest, we do the topic that we're talking about. So like when Joe Scaff was on, he's an artist, and he actually had me draw a little piece of art along with him. Or when my dad came on, and he's a musician also, we played a song together. That was really cool.
That's cool.
So, and we can't do it every episode, but I was wondering if you had any idea of something we could do together in regards to this topic in just a couple minutes over the internet. But something involving woodworking. We can't do it every episode, but just wondering if you had anything that you thought of.
Let's pull out the table saws. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
It's still light out here in California.
Oh, I'm in Chicago. It's dark, but also, I'm not sure. Do you have anything in mind? I don't sing. I don't sing. I don't do anything musical. I'm very musically challenged.
Give me just a second. I want to see if I can get something off the wall. Okay, you want to hold on a second?
Sure.
Okay, I'm back. I could not get it off the wall. I had a pot holder, oven mitt and pot holder that I had made for my wife with some flamed pallet wood that was attached to the wall that turned out nice, but I didn't like how the finish turned out. And I was going to ask you maybe if you had any advice on potentially refinishing it for a different color, but could not get it off the wall. I secured it too well. Oh, well.
Well, I mean, it's funny because like this whole time I've been talking to you, my view has been this zebra wood.
Okay.
Wood that's going to turn into like a pencil box.
Okay, so we're going to get towards the end here, and I'm going to wrap up here before I get you the silly questions at the end. But we're going to ask you the big question of the show, which is, for Hadeel, what is N+1? What is next for you in your woodworking journey? What is coming up? What's on the horizon? Do you have any big plans? What is next?
I'm currently working on my largest carving piece.
Really? Tell me about it.
It's going to be a coffee table, and the base is going to be totally carved out.
Really?
The shape is going to be, that's why I was learning how to do segmented rings. It's going to be basically a bunch of segmented rings.
Wow.
The entire base is going to be carved. But other than that, I'm just really going to be prioritizing education if I can. I want to take classes. I want to get more into education, like especially challenging myself with things that I'm not really that comfortable with that I'd like to learn. So
that's awesome. And I wanted to ask a question about your shop overhaul. You know, you've been cataloging that on TikTok. How close you guys to getting done with that?
Oh, not even close. Because there's my husband's not been feeling well the last couple days, so
bummer.
I help carrying some things because my arms are useless, but I have no muscle capacity at all. But I need his help, like just moving some things around in order for me to like move on to some of the next steps. So, and of course, I'm like working. So it's hard to find the pockets of time to actually make good progress. But one of the walls is complete, and once that's complete, I think within the next couple weeks, I'll be done with it to the point where I could actually start on projects again.
Oh yeah.
Right
So
now, they're unusable.
are you just like cleaning, straightening, organizing? I know you're like painting the walls and stuff, but are you guys gonna are you guys gonna like air condition the shop and like all that stuff, and like add in like all the dust collection and the whole works, or you just cleaning it up so that it's organized?
So we're cleaning it up so that it's organized because currently our workflow is just horrendous. We spend more time looking for things than we do actually making things.
Oh, I feel you.
Um,
I'm the same way.
right. So we're trying to like add more storage so we could be, put things away a little bit more in a way that makes sense so that we're a lot more efficient when we're out there working. But also, like, we were trying to upgrade our dust collection. Like you said, I'm painting the walls, but um, I can't get to all of it just because there's stuff everywhere. So I have to do the painting in stages. And it's just like I would love to epoxy the floors at some point, but I can't. There's no way for me to move everything out of the shop. So I'm just creating a better functional space altogether. Nothing big. We already have, thankfully, the owners previous to us, the husband was a contractor. So, and that's where he would do a lot of his cabinet making. So the garage is actually already temperature controlled, which is nice. We have dust collection. It's not great, but we're still going to use it. And we're just going to add like the piping, the PVC pipes and all that to just kind of actually have it go to several different tools.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, so thank you so much for coming in. I know it's pretty late over where you're at, so thank you for accommodating and coming in on a Tuesday night. And how can people find you, follow you, watch your TikToks? How can people find you?
Everything is at Four Rivers Studio. Four Rivers Studio. Four is in like
The number
the number
four.
is spelled out FOUR.
Oh, it's spelled out. Sorry, not the number
Yeah,
four. Spelled out four.
right.
FOUR.
The website is the number four riverstudio.com.
And I'll put
Yeah,
links in the show notes. So if you're listening on an audio podcast, it'll be in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, just click more, and it'll be down in the show notes. And you can follow. You can go straight to there, and I'll have links to her Instagram and to her website in the show notes to follow Hadeel and see some of her TikToks. And I'll put a link to the TikTok also, and Instagram and everything. Anything else that you wanted to plug or anything?
well, we're on YouTube, but it's kind of dead over there. So we're trying to grow our YouTube channel. Hopefully, we'll start posting more long form content over there.
Nice.
So
Awesome. Okay, so I have two silly questions that I ask every guest, and this is my favorite part of the show. I always start laughing because this is so dumb, but it's my favorite part of the show. Okay, so the first silly question is, I want you to say a quick sentence or two and casually drop the name of the most famous person that you've ever met.
Met or
like encountered, been in the same room with, like you just like the most famous person. It doesn't have to be like a long like story. Just
I was in LA one time on Rodeo Drive and was standing outside a nail shop and saw Rachel Zoe, I believe her name is. It was like a fashion designer, and I was just
okay.
I was just kind of staring, and I stared back like, "What are you looking at?" Not in a rude way, but I was just like, why is this lady staring at me? And then my friend's like, "Do you know who that is?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know who that was." But
Okay, what was the name again?
Rachel Zoe, I believe her name is. Like a famous designer, like clothing designer.
Okay, amazing. That's a good story. Okay, and then the last question, and we will get you out of here. What is, in your opinion, the greatest all-time cartoon theme song?
Cartoon theme song, the Animaniacs,
Yes,
for sure.
Animaniacs. Nice. We just
That
did. Sorry, go ahead.
I know I'm a little bit old for this, but Phineas and Ferb also has a great.
Such a banger, dude. 104 days of summer vacation. You know, we're at the perfect age where we got to watch all of the Phineas and Ferbs with our kids. So that was perfect. We just had a. Sorry, go ahead.
I
What's
said
that?
I watched prior to having kids.
No shame there. Yeah, we just had an episode. I'm going to mention it again, where me and my wife and my sister did a cartoon theme song rundown, where we watched the cartoon theme songs and talked about our favorites and debated about which was the best. So if you guys are listening, you guys can go and watch that, and you can comment which was your favorite. We ask every guest. We got a lot of X-Men, a lot of Animaniacs, a lot of DuckTales.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. But anyway, Hadeel, thanks you again so much for coming in. Hey, if you are watching this, I would appreciate it if you gave us a like or a subscribe, or even better, share this with someone who you think might enjoy this episode. That's a great way to grow the show. Another thing you can do would be if you wanted to join our Facebook group. We have a very small Facebook group, but it is a place where I share the episodes. I share information about the episodes. Sometimes I share extra content like pictures or extra art or extra content about the episodes, or polls, that kind of thing. There will be a link in the show notes if you want to join the Facebook group. That would be a great way to do that. Other than that, until next time, this has been Adam from Miller's Custom Guitars and the M+1 podcast, and reminding you to don't be a jerk. Thanks, guys.